over to you, Dr. Aparna, for
Yes,
your
yes,
dynamic
yes.
deliberation.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me. It's always the best time of my, time is always teaching the students. So please understand that there is no simple question, no stupid question, no silly question. Ask any question that comes in. You have to understand aerodynamics really, really well before, and it's my favorite topic. So it will be very big shame for me if I don't make you understand what aerodynamics is, right? So let me start now. Okay. Now,
Yes, please start.
some disturbance in the background. Somebody is not muted. There's some disturbance.
Please mute everybody. Please mute everybody to mute.
Hello? Yeah. Now I'll start. Okay. Now, what is urodynamics? Right? Now, urodynamics basically is study of the hydrology and mechanics of urinary bladder filling, emptying, and voiding. Okay. The ICS says it's basically it's the study of the function and dysfunction of lower urinary tract by any appropriate method. Very important to understand this. So we talk about any appropriate method. It actually means that all the workup you do before urodynamics is a part of understanding the bladder. You cannot do urodynamics until you have done normal examination of the patient, a proper cough stress test, empty supine stress test, bladder diary. I'm not included that as a part of this talk because of the fact that I'm focusing on the procedure itself. But please understand that when we talk about urodynamics being the study of the function and dysfunction lower urinary tract by any appropriate method, it does not include only the procedure of urodynamics. It also includes the entire workup you do before the patient comes to urodynamics, chair. You need to understand from the extremely good history you've taken and the examination you've done and the bladder diary you've done, what exactly are you looking for? Because urodynamics is basically garbage in, garbage out sometimes. If you do not know what you're looking for, you're going to misdiagnose the patient, correct? So please understand that urodynamics is includes all the preliminary workup, and then you're taking the patient to the lab and you're studying under lab situation normal bladder function. And what is normal bladder function? It fills, it stores, and it empties. Okay, please understand that. Now, when we talk about urodynamic testing, the procedure, right? It is often called complex or multi-channel or subtracted cystometrogram, right? Why is it called like that? It's called that way because what are you doing? You are actually looking at bladder function with the help of catheters that have pressure transducers. Okay. Now, why do we use those pressure transducers? Because you're looking at bladder function by measuring the bladder pressures, the abdominal pressures, the urethral pressures, and the detrusor muscle pressures, right? And you record all of these pressures during the various stages of bladder function. During filling, storage, we could include exertion, right? Like right now I'm talking to you, right? And my bladder is storing urine, right? I'm moving around, right? So there's an exertion happening, but the bladder is doing some activity doing that. So your urodynamics will measure that. Right? And when I'm emptying bladder, right? So it's called complex or multi-channel because simultaneously I'm measuring various pressures, intravesical, intra-abdominal, and detrusor pressures. Now, why is it called subtracted cystometry? Because detrusor pressure is not directly calculated. It is a subtraction of the vesical pressure and abdominal pressure. I'm going to come to that later on, but we'll park it for the time being. Why it is called subtracted cystometry, right? But you understood complex or multi-channel, right? It's because of the fact that you're measuring multiple pressures at one time. Now, what are the indications for complex urodynamics, right? Now, the indication of complex urodynamics are many, right? Now, the first important thing to remember is this, is that when you have inconclusive, single channel, simple studies, like you've done your diagnostics and you're not really sure what you're dealing with, correct? You only measure bladder pressures and you find that it's not conclusive, you might want to do complex urodynamics. Patient has complicated history, right? Sometimes patient will have dysfunctional voiding along with leaking of urine. Such a patient, I will do urodynamics at the very onset, correct? I would do urodynamics in recurrent urinary incontinence, right? You've done surgery for SUI, it's failed. I would do recurrent urinary I would do complex urodynamics. Mixed urinary incontinence, I would do. Continuous leakage, right? It's like insensible loss, continuous leakage, I would do. Voiding dysfunction, if there is reduced bladder capacity, right? A lot of it, right? There's voiding dysfunction, you would do it. Any neurologic pathology, severe stress incontinence, and refractory urinary incontinence. Now, the stress incontinence part of it, I'm going to park right now. Okay. I'm going to come, once I've described the procedure, I'm going to come back to you on when to do urodynamics in SUI and in urgency incontinence. I'm going to talk to you later on. And why, what evidence is presented should be read with great, caution. Okay. But overall, these are the indications, right? So SUI and urgency incontinence, I'm going to talk about when to do it later after the procedure, right? Any questions till now?
Aparna, just clarify that these are the indications which you have written for complex urodynamic. You just tell us the steps and then you tell us when you will actually do it. And then you tell us for complex UDS. So let's go the other way around, because you just think that we are beginners.
Okay.
And we just want to understand.
Yes.
पहले आप ना इनको UDS बताओ, what are studies, and then what are the scenarios in which you will do it. Level 1 scenario, level 2, I think we'll comprehend better.
Well, I'll tell you what I was going to do that anyway. I'm going to give you what is urodynamics, and then we'll discuss each condition. Is that okay?
Yeah. First, just rattle off the tests. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So first, when you do urodynamics, you will start off with uroflowmetry. Okay. There is no urodynamics before doing uroflowmetry. Now, what is uroflowmetry? Uroflowmetry is a simple non-invasive technique. Okay. It is non-invasive because in uroflowmetry, you're not using any pressure transducers, and you always perform it in the outpatient setting. Okay. It's a screening test. Every patient who's got any voiding problem or stress urinary incontinence should at least undergo a simple non-invasive uroflowmetry. Okay. It is a means of selecting patients who require more complex urodynamic studies. Okay. So this is also called as non-instrumented uroflowmetry. Why do you say non-instrumented? Because you're not putting any transducers inside. You just make the patient sit on the commode, pee, and you're measuring the volume and the flow rate, right? So you're going to, how do you measure the flow rate, right? There are multiple ways of doing it. Two precise ones, right? There's a weighted one. So you see this on the left, there's a weighted disc, meaning you see this jar which is sitting on a weighted disc. It is measuring the weight. And as the jar is filling up, as a woman is peeing, it's giving you a calculation of volume. It's giving you a calculation of flow rate. So it's a weighted disc. There's another kind of uroflowmetry where it's a rotating disc, right? So there's a rotatory, there's a element in this that rotates. And basically, as it rotates, as you pee, the rate of rotation changes. And as the rate of rotation changes, you're getting the flow volume and the flow rate. There are these two basic kinds of flow recorders that you will get in your clinic, right? So if you look at the Labori ones, I don't know, Gangaram has which one? Urodynamics?
Labori.
The Labori will be the left one. Okay, weighted one. And there are some older ones like Dantec or MMS, which are the rotating disc ones. Okay, it doesn't matter. Both of them will give you, as appropriate as possible, the volume and the flow rate, right?
Yeah, so Dantec is the one I did my thesis on, which was in Maulana Azad about 20 years back.
And that is rotating disc. Okay, now, how do you do with the weighted ones, right? Which is the one in Gangaram right now. Right? You sit on a commode. Ideally, the commode should be in the restroom, because when you're doing urodynamics, you have to replicate as far as possible the normal circumstances of the woman. Okay. Now, that is why it's so important to do uroflowmetry before you do urodynamics with transducers. Because once you have pressure transducers in the bladder doesn't work very well. I mean, imagine sitting in a room with everybody walking around and you're asked to pee. It doesn't work well. So uroflowmetry allows you a chance to sit in the commode. Ideally, in my own clinic, I have a Bluetooth-enabled uroflowmetry. So what happens is the patient sits on a commode in the bathroom and I'm recording outside. So it's as close to normal as possible. And when they pee, they'll pee into this, jar, which is on the weighted disc. So what will happen, right? You will get a graph like this. Okay. So what is the graph? Understand this. The x-axis is time. and the y-axis is flow rate in ml per second. Okay. Now what happens is you get a upswing which is quite brisk and then a slower downswing. You see this? This is how it should be, a bell-shaped curve with a very brisk upswing and a little longer downswing, right? And what are the measurements you get? Your flow rate and the significance of flow rate is measured generally on maximum flow rate. What is maximum flow rate? It's also called as Q max. Q is the flow rate and maximal flow rate, right? Now, Q max is obviously at the point where the bell-shaped curve has reached its apex, right? So this particular point, right, is shown in the graph, right? This is your maximum flow rate, right? Now, ideally, average flow rate is actually as important. Remember, because sometimes what happens is that the patient is moved or patient has suddenly, suddenly the flow rate hits the disc with, because as an artifact very fast, sometimes you can have a very good maximum flow rate, but your average may not be great, right? However, unfortunately, all our parameters of what is voiding dysfunction is based on maximum flow rate. So that's why we have to go with it. But always when you get measurements, always look at the maximum flow rate and see how much it matches the average flow rate. Now, but because of convention based on maximum flow rate, I'm going to use that, right? So normally, if a woman is under 50 years of age, your Qmax is always generally more than 25 ml per second. And a female over 50 years of age, Qmax is generally more than 18 ml per second. That is why, if you look at diagnostics, I mean, there's some parameters given. They talk about Qmax less than 15 ml per second as something you need to start thinking of as potential voiding dysfunction. Okay. So that is because 25 under 50 and 18 above 50 is considered normal. Any woman who has got a maximum flow rate less than 15 ml per second, I'm going to start worrying about voiding dysfunction. Okay. Now, so you get a graph like this, right? What do you get? Normally, when you do your Europhometry, you get a graph like this. What do you see? The top graph is the flow pattern, right? The flow rate. And the bottom one is the volume. You see this? You see the woman is voided 527. You see on the right, woman is voided 527. And your ml per, 1 second. Yeah, ml per second is maximum ml. 28 ml per second was the maximum one. Qmax. Okay, so this is what you normally see. You see, there is a upswing and then there's a downswing that is slower. And this up and down that you see here is artifact. The woman is moved, so you have an artifact here. But generally, this is a very good flow. Okay, now examples, right? Now this is what you normally get, right? This is a very good one. And when you get a graph and when you get measurements, what do you see? I told you, you get the maximum flow rate, you get the average flow rate, you get the voided volume, you get the time to maximum flow, you get the flow time, and you get the voiding time. Correct? So voiding time is basically all the time that you've given, from time that she's sitting and you put on the machine. And the flow time is for the time that the flow is actually started. Now, when I do in my clinic, I always make the patient sit comfortably, right? Get her used to sitting there. Okay. And then after a second or more, after a minute or two, then I give them permission to void. So do not make up, you have to always follow this, right? You make the patient sit on the commode, give her some time to settle down, and then say, okay, now I give permission to void. That is very important. Normally what happens is you are actually giving a cue to the brain to give permission to bladder to now void. Okay. So always, it's like if you see in my graphs of Europhometry, you will see one point where I've given permission to void and I mark it. Okay. And that is why, because why am I doing that? Because it tells me, it lets me understand if the woman has hesitancy. I've given her permission to void, but does it take time for her to start voiding? It helps me understand that, right? So always tell the woman, okay, now I give you permission to void, and then she starts voiding, right? Now then you can have, while this bell-shaped curve is a good one, you can have a constrictive flow pattern, right? Now what is a constrictive flow pattern? This is a bladder outlet obstruction, right? There is a constant obstruction of the outflow tract. And that is why it's a constrictive pattern. You see, this is no bell-shaped curve, and your maximum flow rate is less than, is around 20. It's you know, here if you see 25 ml per second, if you see this, there's a row is 25, it's less than 25 ml per second, right? So it's a constrictive pattern of flow. And here you're going to start thinking, is there something obstructing the bladder, flow? Now, here you're seeing something different, right? What do you see? You see this red, up and down EMG. Now, what is happening in this patient? This is a patient who's come to me with history of dysfunctional voiding. She told me that she's got hesitancy, meaning it takes a little while to start peeing. She had intermittent flow. She also had to strain to pee. She also had, a condition where, she felt incomplete emptying, correct? Now, such a patient, when I'm doing uroflowmetry, this is a patient of dysfunctional voiding. I am suspecting that she maybe also had, I want to understand why she got dysfunctional voiding, right? So there are two reasons, right? Either the pelvic muscle is not relaxing, or urethra is not relaxing. So when I'm doing my uroflowmetry, I can easily attach surface EMG leads. Like, the ECG leads, you apply perianally, right? Perianally on the left and the right, you apply those stickers and you make the patient pee with those stickers. So what happens is, you can see this clearly, right? You see the flow, the top row, look at the flow, how it's interrupted. You see this? It's going up, coming down, going up and coming down. This is interrupted flow, right? And the volume is very low, right? Basically, see very low, small volume void she had, right? Around less than 100. But look at this EMG, right? Look at this EMG. A surface EMG went up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Normally, when you pee, your EMG needs to relax because the pelvic floor relaxes on voiding. The minute I give her permission to void, her EMG should become silent. It should become, quieter, right? However, in her, she's got accelerations and decelerations. This is a woman who's a dysfunctional voider. When I give her permission to void, instead of relaxing, the pelvic floor is contracting away. And that is why she got interrupted flow. I will take her for complex urodynamics and look at her urethral function also. Okay. So this is uroflowmetry. Now, the main thing about uroflowmetry is that you can only opine on uroflowmetry if she's got voided at least 150 ml. You cannot opine on uroflowmetry at less than 150 ml of emptying. Right now, you also get patterns like this, right? When there's up and down that's happening, that's an artifact.
Aparna, sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah.
Since these are very basic people, we have to tell them that you don't, when you give the instruction before they come to your lab, they should not be having bursting bladders. It should be as physiological.
I was going to come to that.
Just that instruction should be just mentioned that.
Yeah. I was anyway going to mention that as a part of urodynamics. I'll mention that now only. Okay. Madam has raised a very, 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 very important point, is that normally what happens is, when we ask the patient to come comfortably full bladder, sometimes we don't mention to them that don't be so full that your bladder is bursting. Never even do ultrasound like that to see post-void residual. What happens is, when the bladder is completely full, it doesn't work well. Have you ever seen that when you're sleeping at night and you get up in the morning with full bladder, sometimes your flow rate is not so great. It's a thin stream, it's a long stream. Why? Because a very distended bladder doesn't work well. So it's very important always to do uroflowmetry or even the later urodynamics. When you ask a patient to come, one second, one patient is just one second. One second.
All the PGs keep
extremely full bladder because bladder doesn't work well. You need to tell a woman, what I do in my clinic, right? I will always have a bladder diary before I do even uroflowmetry. In her bladder diary, I will note her average volume and her maximum volume. I will understand what is comfortably full bladder. And I'm going to ask her to come at comfortably full bladder. Understand what I'm trying to say? Now, this is a very important thing to remember, is that doctors, we doctors do not pee in time. Sometimes our comfortably full bladder can be even 800, 900 ml. I have had doctors coming to me like that because and then our bladder doesn't work well. So it's not enough to tell the woman to come comfortably full bladder, because a comfortably full bladder may be extremely dilated distended bladder, because women postpone peeing in India. I know that. So you have to look at the bladder diary and see what is the volume at which they normally void. If they void 800 and 900 ml, you have to actually train them to void every 3 hours. So in that case, I'm not going to ask her to come at 900. If she's got voiding dysfunction issues, then I will do 2 uroflowmetries. I will do uroflowmetry at her, what is her comfortably full, and I will do uroflowmetry at a little lower volume. Why? Because I want to understand, is the bladder dysfunction happening because she's too full, or is it because the bladder is anyway dysfunctional? Because a too full bladder dysfunction is not a correct dysfunction. Understand that. I hope I'm not complicating it.
No, Aparna, I'm glad you brought that out, because that is a very important point for us to diagnose, that if a woman is a habitual holder of urine, she is anyway going to have dysfunction, and you have to treat more at a mental level than at a pharmacological level.
Not this mental level, it's a functional disorder. Dysfunctional voider, we do biofeedback physiotherapy because they've done this very bad habit. So obviously you have to treat a mental level, but you also have to train how to relax the pelvic floor. But also women who are used to holding more urine,
Dr. Geeta,
you have to ensure that. Yeah.
Yes, Chandra. Yes,
yeah,
Chandra.
Dr. Geeta, here in the India, we don't have outside on the roads and everywhere the proper washrooms.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The sufferers
That's
are
one
the
of the
females.
reasons.
The sufferers are the female. You see, men can stand anywhere and empty the bladder, but the females. So we are used to holding I think more than 80-90% females must be used to holding the urine for more than 4-5 years.
That's what that's what Aparna
I'm trying to say that. I'm trying to say that.
वही तो वो कह रही है, वही तो देखना है आपको. Then biofeedback करो उसको ठीक करने के लिए.
No, I'll tell you what. I will look at a bladder diary. I will look at a bladder diary. I will understand at what volume she's normally voiding. Okay. I will also give you from it at that particular volume. I'll tell her because I want to know at that volume how a bladder is working. Okay?
Yes.
Having said that, I need to diagnose whether it is. See, women like us have got delayed sensation. That is different from dysfunctional voiding.
Yes.
Okay? You can have delayed sensation, but void normally, like how I do. I am a delayed voider. I can tell you this openly. Okay. Seriously. But I am not a dysfunctional voider because I'm not contracting the pelvic floor. I've just got delayed sensation of filling because I've got to get used to it. Now there are other people, especially adolescent girls, young girls who develop this very bad habit of squeezing up because they're controlling the urge. They may develop dysfunctional voiding, and then in them you will get a flow like this. You will get a surface EMG like this, right? They're constricting. They're getting this very bad habit. कि पिशाब करने के टाइम relax नहीं कर रहे हैं. Okay, they're squeezing away. Okay, अपना pelvic floor. Normally, pelvic floor should relax while emptying. Now, when any woman gives me history of dysfunctional voiding, hesitancy, interpret flow, I will always do uroflowmetry with surface EMG. Okay. Now, next we will go on to cystometry. Okay. Now, I'm going stepwise. A woman has come comfortably full to my lab. I have done her uroflowmetry. I've done a screening test. Then I'm going to take her on my urodynamics chair. And by the way, I will send you a photograph. I don't have it as a slide here, but I'll send you a photograph on my urodynamics chair that I designed myself. Okay. Later on through Dr. Geeta, and you can see it. I have a urodynamics chair.
Sure.
It's not the same as what is used by men. If you go to a lot of hospitals by urology, by urodynamics done within urology, they will not have the kind of urodynamics chair I have. Why? Because they have a kind of a bed. Because men don't need a chair, right? Men stand and pee. Women sit and pee, correct? Right? Or women squat and pee. Now, in such a case, what do I need a chair? Because I need a chair which has got a double sitting thing, right? A leg little raised up, and then when they're peeing, leg down. I have a chair like that I've designed, and I'll send the photograph to you all, right? Why am I saying this? Always do cystometry, whatever you do, in a physiological position. Even, in government hospital, the patients who come actually used to peeing by squatting. And I've really not understood how to create a squatting position for urodynamics as of now, which I'm hoping to do. But at least have a sitting kind of thing, which you cannot get in normal labs, which are the urology labs, because lying down position is not the right position for understanding either cystometry or, later on when you move them for peeing. Okay. So please understand that as physiological as possible. So get them on a urodynamics chair. Then we will do, but what do I do? I will do PVR. So I've made them pee in the commode, got them on the chair. I will do PVR, post-void residual. I'll see how much is remaining behind. So I completely empty the bladder. Then at this stage, I tend to do urethral pressure profile. But I'm not going to talk about urethral pressure profile now, because generally the kind of urodynamics you're going to see will have cystometrogram done. Urethral pressure profile is not done by urologists. So I'm going to talk about it last, because normally the urodynamics strips you see will not have urethral pressure profile. So I want to focus on it right now. Okay. I'm going to go directly to cystometrogram. Now, what is cystometrogram? Cystometrogram evaluates filling and storage, right? It's a functional information you get of filling and storage. And it's a multi-channel cystometry or complex cystometry or subtractor cystometry. Now, why is that? Because you're doing cystometry, that is, you're filling the bladder with pressure transducers inside the bladder and the abdomen. Okay. Now, what are the things, right? So I have got this graphical representation to show you, right? I have got my, if you see the pink catheter, it is inside the bladder and has got two balloons, right? You see this balloon here? The blue balloon is measuring the bladder pressure. Okay. And I have in my lab, I also measure urethral pressures. Urologists do not measure urethral pressures. I do. So I use multi-channel even for the bladder and urethra, right? The two channels measuring pressures, right? So the yellow one is measuring urethral pressures, right? So so when it's measuring pressure, I get PVES. Okay. PVES meaning vesical pressure, and I get PURA, which is urethral pressure, right? In centimeter of water. Okay. Now, very importantly, in Gangaram, in Safdarjung, in Medanta, everywhere you have water perfused transducers. Okay. Now, there are different ways in which you measure pressure. In most hospitals in India, you have water perfused, meaning it's a water channel that gets created based upon which you measure pressures. I use air charged. Okay, that's a very different way of measuring pressure. I use it because I'm trained in it, and I find it to be more physiologic than water perfused. But that will just let you know that the urodynamics you will see in Gangaram and other urology places are water perfused urodynamics. Okay, just to tell you how you measure pressures. Now we've got the catheter inside measuring bladder pressure and urethral pressure. Then we will have another catheter, which is the blue catheter in the abdomen. Now, when I'm trying to measure in the abdomen, what do? I can put the transducer either in the vagina or the anal canal. Yeah, you see here it's in the vagina, and on the right side you see the diagram is in the anal canal, rectum. I like to put in the anal canal. Why? Because if a woman has prolapse, you must not put the transducer in the vagina. So in Cleveland Clinic, when I trained, they would always put in the vagina, and only in women who have got prolapse would be put it in the anal canal. But in my clinic back in India, I always put the abdominal transducer in the anal canal, and I will put around 10 to 15 centimeter inside. Okay, the anal canal, because the transducer will have markings, so you know how much centimeter you put inside. Okay. Now what is happening when you put in the anal canal or the vagina? It's measuring abdominal pressure. Okay, so you get PABD. So you understood PVES, PURA, and PABD. You fix it like that, right? Now, I also have EMG. Not all hospitals have it, but for completion, it's important to mention it. And I always have it in my own urodynamics, right? Why I have got EMG? I'm looking at the pelvic muscle, and I'm seeing how well it's working or relaxing well during filling and emptying, right? So how do I measure the surface EMG? You see this perianally. This is the anal canal. On either side of the anal canal, I have got EMG leads. These are EMG superficial pads around the anus. Okay. So how you see that marking here, right? EMG, I'll stick here, I'll stick here, right? You see the markings here. So I've got EMG leads, I've got the bladder transducer, and I've got the anal transducer, right? And what do I get? I get different pressures. Cystometrogram, right? So what do I get, right? You see that I have put in the bladder transducer, so I'm getting the PVES. You understand? And I'm also going to get the PURA. You see above is the PURA. because I've got both the transducers. If you see here, I've got two. Sorry. I've got two, PVES and PURA. So I'm going to get PVES and PURA. Okay, PVES, and above I'm going to get PURA. You see the PURA here, it's not marked out in my graphs, but you see the black PURA. PURA is above here, right? And then you get a PVES. Then I'm also going to get the PABD. You see the PABD, right? From the blue, I'm getting the PABD. Okay, now, do you see the green line? The green line, that is PDET, detrusor pressure. Okay, now, I'm going to come to PDET a little later. I also get the EMG, right? You see the red EMG, I'm getting the EMG. Now PDET, let's come to the PDET. Okay, now the PDET is not calculated by any transducer you put inside. It is a subtracted value given to you by the machine. Now PDET is this particular green thing. You see this green thing? It's a bladder muscle, right? Detrusor muscle. Now to get the detrusor muscle pressure, you have to, how do you get it? It is basically PVES minus PABD. Okay, the pressure inside the bladder minus the pressure in the abdomen gets you the muscle pressure. Why? Because the bladder muscle is between the bladder and the abdomen. So PVES minus PABD gives you PDET. That's why it's called subtracted cystometry, because the detrusor pressure is not directly measured. It's subtracted value given to you by the machine. It's not measured by the catheter. Okay, PDET. So PDET is basically PVES minus PABD. Are you okay with me? Okay, now tell me, anybody understood? I'm going to stop here because these are very important points. Any questions, please ask.
Aparna, just clarify to them once again that the PVES and PABD are actually the recorded pressures, and the PDET is a computer generated value.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. No, subtracted value.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, some of these concepts, I think, because they are absolute newcomers, you will have to repeat some of these concepts, basic concepts, that it is a subtracted measurement and it is not a catheter value, so to speak.
Agreed. That's what I'm saying. It's already written here, right? That's what I said. You're measuring, your catheters are measuring only bladder muscle pressure and abdominal pressure. Your catheter is not measuring detrusor pressure. Detrusor pressure is a subtracted value. The machine is giving it to you, right? Your bladder, your detrusor muscle is between the bladder and the abdomen. That is why detrusor pressure is PVES minus PABD. The computer
now, the PGs, we are going to just stop for 10 seconds. Please ask your questions or queries if you have not understood any concept. Just because next thing, Aparna is going to actually tell us the pressures as the bladder fills, how the bladder responds to the various filling volumes, how fast the volume is being filled, she will tell. But basic funda is this. If there are any questions, please go ahead and ask.
I think Dr. Geeta, all the PGs, whether they know everything or they don't know anything.
I think they know everything, Dr. Chandra. I'm so happy. That,
I think
Aparna will be very impressed by our PG's knowledge.
No,
because it's very difficult even for me. It's so complicated. I'm trying to understand.
No, I have put up till now I've only done two things. I have put a transducer in the bladder.
Yeah.
I have put a transducer in the inner canal. Okay? And I stuck surface EMG leads. That's all I have done. If you understood this and understood one thing, that when you come to my lab, the bladder transducer has the bladder. There are two balloons. You see these two balloons here? The blue one and the yellow one.
Dr. Geeta, sorry, I'm interrupting. I think
yes,
we can allow our PG at least for one day. They can go all and just have a look on all these machines and understand. That
Absolutely.
will be, the visual impact will be a great.
Chandra, I always leave a message whenever I'm going and doing, but nobody comes or understands. So I have stopped leaving messages. Initially, when I used to do it, I used to leave messages. So anyway, let's discuss that in the department only. So now, Aparna, will you start filling the bladder now and tell us how fast and what you will fill?
Now, then when we start filling the bladder, what happens, right? So then, one second. Okay. When you start filling the bladder, you are going to fill the bladder with how much? Around 50 to 60 ml per minute. Okay. You can use either sterile water or you can even use normal saline. And when you use normal saline and sterile water, please be careful that it should be at room temperature. Okay. If it's in Delhi and it's not room temperature, then what you should do is, you don't warm it up. What you do is you can just take a blanket and put the water in between the blanket for an hour before you do the test. Okay, so that it's warm enough, right? It's room temperature. Now, one very important thing I'm going to say is this, right? I have started off with my cystometrogram, right? When I start off with a cystometrogram, one thing I want to talk about is this, is that always look at your PDET value at the very beginning. Okay, you see the PDET here, look at this PDET. Okay, now you see the PDET when it started. Now you see this is straight, this is the baseline value, baseline. Your PDET was actually below the baseline earlier and then we came back to normal. Now what happened here? Remember one thing, according to good urodynamic practice, your PDET has to always be between -4 and +4. Why? Because everything okay and done correctly, your PVES more or less matches your PABD. Remember that. Okay? Your PVES generally matches PABD when you're starting out. So your PDET has to generally be between -4 and +4. If you see a PDET that is very high or very low, there's something going wrong. You always have to do troubleshooting when you're doing your urodynamics. Okay, so when you get a urodynamics graph in front of you, you need to actually look at these things, because as I told you in urodynamics, garbage in, garbage out. If your transducer is not in place correctly and a PDET is not being measured properly, you are not going to get ideal understanding of what is happening. Okay, generally your PVES matches PABD and your PDET will be between -4 and +4. Okay, when you're starting off with cystometrogram, before you start filling the bladder, you're going to ask the patient to give one small cough. Why are you going to ask the patient to give one small cough? And when you ask the patient to give one small cough, what will happen is you get, this, here the patient has coughed. You see this upswing? Here the patient has coughed. Why am I asking the patient to give a cough? I'm asking the patient to give a cough to see if everything is working properly. When the patient is giving a cough and your PVES and PABD are matching in the cough, then everything is working fine. You need to ensure that everything is where it's supposed to be and things are being measured correctly. So when you're starting off cystometrogram, you're going to notice what is PDET, -4 +4 between them, and you're going to ask the patient to give one cough. That is your housekeeping thing. Then I'm going to start filling. Okay, when I start filling at 50 to 60 ml per minute, then I'm going to ask the patient to give me certain sensations. Okay, what will the patient say? I'm going to ask the patient to say, when do you feel first sensation, first desire, normal desire, strong desire, and urgency? Now, what does that mean? First sensation is first awareness of feeling. So first time you feel something cold is going inside of you. Okay? First sensation generally is something cold going inside of you. First desire is first time you feel that if I went to the bathroom, I'll be able to pee. Okay? And I've given you the normal values there. So I'm not going to go over it. Okay? Your first sensation is first awareness of feeling. First time I feel that, okay, if I went to pee, for the first time I feel that, okay, something cold is going inside of me, something going inside of me. First awareness of feeling. First sensation, first desire is first feeling of wanting to void. First time I felt that if I went to the bathroom, I'll be able to pee. Now, what is normal desire? Normal desire is, normally at that point in time, you'll go and pee. Okay? But if Shah Rukh Khan, if I'm watching TV and Shah Rukh Khan is dying, or if I'm cooking something, I can wait for 5 minutes. Okay? So normal desire is, normally if I'm doing nothing, I will go at that particular point to pee. But I can wait for 5 minutes, because if my favorite actor is dying, or I'm cooking something, I'm making tea, I can wait for 5 minutes. Strong desire is desire where I can't wait. It's persistent desire. Shah Rukh Khan may be dying, or I'm making tea, I put it off and go and pee, because the desire is really strong. But there is no fear of leakage. Okay? Urgency is compelling desire, the little fear of leakage. The way we say it is, we are on the road and you stop at a McDonald's, in the female bathroom is completely full, big line, you go to the male bathroom. It's so bad. Okay, so these are sensations you're going to ask. First sensation, first desire, normal desire, strong desire, and urgency. At the point of urgency, basically it is the maximum cystometric capacity. Okay, the volume at urgency is the maximum cystometric capacity, and maximum cystometric capacity generally between 300 to 500 ml. Okay, understand?
Aparna, I will just interject at this time. Very nicely you have explained to this, but for the consumption of PGs, you see, you need, just like before you put your Mirenas, you need to counsel her for 20 minutes in your OPD. Similarly, when you are performing a cystometry, you have to counsel the patient that, look, I'll be asking you these questions because, you know, you are sitting in a alien environment. There is a bladder getting filled, and there's something sticking in your anus, and there's something sticking in your bladder, and there are 2 stickers around your anus, and doctor is asking, are you having? So before you stick those things inside the patient's body, tell them that, look, you just play a video, or if you have some video cassette or something, or you can verbally tell them that, look, this is what will happen. You will feel something cold and I will be asking you at time to time, when is the first sensation? Because you see, at that time, everybody's so confused. And if you see these values, which Aparna has given such a wide range, why there is such a wide range? Because you see, you can never reproduce one particular CMG. Next time she's wiser and she may say, oh yeah, now I feel. First time when you were doing, she was not aware. It's like a fetal movements in a multi and a primary, The movement was always there, but being a primary, she doesn't realize till 6 months that was what she was feeling was a fetal movement. So it's very important for you to counsel and what she's feeling, because your whole diagnosis is based on the patient's response. Absolutely. It's a very subjective thing. It's not an objective thing. Patient, you are depending on the patient. There is no laboratory value coming. His sugar is 200, so she's diabetic. So it is very important that counsel the patient that this is the questions I will be asking you. When you first feel means you just close your mind and think, are you feeling something cold going there? First desire, you explain all these points because you will be just noting like a robot now on the computer. Absolutely. Please carry on.
Absolutely. No, very important. Counseling is a very important part of any procedure you do. The patient should know what you're going to do inside of her, right? So it's an extremely important point to have made, right? That madam has made a right point, right? The counseling is very important to the patient. And also, no one should be entering the lab. It should be private. It should be as close to normal voiding patterns as possible. So all of those things are extremely important, right? Now, if you see this graph, right? If you see this graph, right? What do you see in this graph, right? You are seeing, and I wanted to only concentrate on the left and the right of the cough. Okay, what are you seeing in this, right? You see this red line. Can you see my, one second, I'm going to just show mark. Oh yeah, one second, annotate. I'm going to just, one second. I can't annotate here. Okay. Anyway, can you see the red? Can you see the red line?
Yeah, just use your pointer. Yeah, we can see that. Thank you.
Okay, now when you see the PVES, you just see the PVES. How the PVES is basically flat. Only when I asked the patient to cough, it went up and down. But again, it came back flat. You see this? And if you look at the PAB, again, it's flat. Okay, when I asked the patient to cough, it went up and down, then again flat. What does it mean? It means that as the bladder is filling up, the bladder pressures do not rise. Please understand that. Your PVES remains flat. Okay, a normal bladder, when it's filling up, very important point for you to notice, right? When you're filling the bladder, notice the bladder compliance. See if the bladder pressure remains the same as the bladder is filling up. In a woman in whom there's bladder muscle damage because of back pressure changes, too much of dysfunctional voiding, or there's fibrosis that's happened, what will happen is that your bladder will not be able to expand without increase in pressure. Your PVES will go up and up and up and up and up. That is a bad. If it goes, as the bladder is filling and your line is not flat and it keeps going up, it's a bad thing. This is a patient in whom you can have kidney failure happening earlier, because in a woman who's got non-compliant bladder, your kidneys can fail. Very important thing to notice, right? So this is an important thing to see. Compliance, bladder compliance. Normal detrusor should demonstrate little or no change in pressure as it fills. In theory, it's infinitely compliant. And compliance is change in volume over change in pressure. Volume should be able to change with no change in pressure. Very important. Any question here? I can't go ahead unless you understood this.
I think you can go ahead, Aparna. We are clear. Thank you.
Yeah. Next, I'm going to do what? At every, you saw this, I've asked the patient to cough, right? At every 50 ml of filling, I'm going to ask the patient to cough. Okay? At every 50 ml of filling. Why? Because if a woman has got SUI, I want to know, does she have early leak? Okay? And when does she leak? At what point does she start leaking? So at every 50 ml, 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, I'm going to ask her to cough. And when I ask her to cough, I'm going to observe if she leaks. Okay? Now, if she leaks and cough, but the bladder pressure is not changing. You see this patient in whom there's an upswing like this, but the bladder pressure comes down immediately after cough ends and becomes flat again. And she leaks. This is SUI. Stress urinary incontinence. Why? Because the leaking has happened because of the cough, but the bladder pressure has not changed. Bladder muscle is not contracted. Yes, you see period here, like slight rise, but it's coming back to normal here. This is not a detrusor contraction. This is cough causing irregular bladder contractions, right? Because PVS and PAP may not increase simultaneously, right? When coughing. That's why you have a little bit of period going up and down. But this is a leaking that is happening without detrusor muscle contracting. So if she leaks on cough and detrusor muscle pressure comes back to normal immediately, that is SUI. Understand that. Look out for it.
Aparna, you'll just have to explain that a little clearly. That in just go back. Yeah. They must understand that if there is an overactive bladder, there will be a green. Okay, fine.
Yeah. See, the whole thing is there, na?
Yeah, that's when they will understand that the SUI bladder behavior is different.
No, I'm coming to that, right?
Okay.
Then I'm coming to that. Yeah. Now, in SUI, there is no bladder muscle contraction. There's another kind of leaking where there is bladder muscle contraction, right? And that is detrusor overactivity linked incontinence. That's urgency incontinence, right? So in a woman in whom, see, you see this bladder muscle, see, look at this particular box you see here. In this box, your abdominal pressure is straight, flat, but your bladder muscle pressure is rising slightly. This is a detrusor overactivity. I showed you in the graph earlier, here, the bladder muscle pressure didn't rise at all. It is flat. But if it rises, right? Here, it's, see, look at this. Here is rising a little, right? Now, when it rises like that, see, I'm going to show you just a graphical way. It's rising like that. Then the detrusor overactivity is an involuntary contraction of the detrusor muscle during filling. An involuntary contraction of the detrusor muscle during filling is called detrusor overactivity. If it is associated with leaking and you see the leaking, then it's called urgency incontinence or overactive bladder of wet. But basically in urodynamics, it's called detrusor overactivity linked incontinence. You're seeing the detrusor overactivity and there is leaking. So detrusor contraction is occurring with urinary leaking. Any detrusor contraction during filling is abnormal. Remember that. Detrusor should not contract during filling. If it's contracting, it's abnormal. You might see detrusor contractions without leaking of urine. You have to note it down. Okay? Many women who have got urgency frequency, women who don't leak but they need to go to the bathroom repeatedly, they can have detrusor overactivity without leaking. Okay? Now, if a woman comes to you with history of overactive bladder, history of urgency incontinence, but when you're doing your procedure, there is no overactivity seen, you need to give triggers. What are the triggers? You can get a cup with water and ask the patient to put her hand in it. You know, like in cup with a mug with water, and you put her fingers in it and put it in the water. Okay, or you ask her to sit up and sit down. or you ask her to walk around a little, or even cough. Cough can trigger bladder contraction in women who have got detrusor overactivity problems. Okay, so if a woman gives you a history, that's what I'm saying. Good history taking is so important. You should know what you're looking out for. If a woman is giving you a history that she's got leaking on the way to the bathroom with urgency that's difficult to control, if a bladder diary is showing leaking with urgency, then if in your urodynamics lab you're not able to elicit it, it's very important to employ triggers, okay, to elicit it, right? So now I've told you already two different kinds of leaking. SUI will happen with something like this. SUI will look like this. SUI leaking clearly like this. There's increase in pressure on cough, but the pressure immediately comes back to normal after the cough is over, and there's leaking you see. That is SUI, stress urinary incontinence.
Just a minute, Aparna, that green, just go back for my own understanding. Your patient is coughing. So the pink is high, that is in the bladder. The blue is high because obviously she's coughing. So abdominal pressure is transmitted to the bladder vessel. Now, when you subtract this, there are these little spikes of the green. Now, isn't it an overactive bladder? Why not?
No.
Why not? Why not?
It's an artifact. That is what happens with the experience. You come to know this particular one thing. Why? Because what happens is that your PVS and PAB never really matches 100%. Okay, because it's a pressure transmission, right? Sometimes when you're coughing, then your abdominal pressure can sometimes rise less than your bladder pressure, maybe. You understand? Or the other way around. So you will have a little bit of flurry of PDET. That is
Right.
not the same as detrusor.
So that means your detrusor, it has its mind of its own, and that's what is this reasoning causing.
No, detrusor doesn't have a mind of its own. No. Detrusor doesn't have a mind of its own. See, detrusor, what you're seeing is an artifact.
Okay.
The PDET you're measuring is basically
Okay. Right.
the machine is giving it to you. What
Right,
happens,
right.
unfortunately, is for some reason your PVS is higher than PAB. Okay, not because it is a muscle contracted, because pressure transmission is a little deeper.
Got it.
I
So
will
actually,
show
the
you that
detrusor is a very quiet person.
Yes.
And if you have a classic overactive bladder picture, maybe you can share with us.
I will
and that
show you.
that
I will
clarify.
show you.
Dr. Aparna, sorry, I'm interrupting in this same graph where in the end, what is the red, dark red in the end of the graph? Here.
Yeah, basically this is EMG. I told the surface EMG. In every patient, I'm measuring EMG. I'm measuring PURA, PVES, PAB, PDET, right? Basically. And whenever what happens is, you see what happens with EMG. If she's coughing, EMG increases. See, in the Gurukul classes, madam had told that you when you cough, when you.
But here the EMG is increasing in the end. Where she's coughing, there's a little bit rise, but after that.
No. So basically, that's because her detrusor pressure increased here. Whenever there's something that is happening, this is like now what happened here is there's both PVES and PAB increased. Okay. Why? Because whenever there's a PVES increase, your abdomen pelvic muscle will contract. Okay, and that's a tendency to squeeze up, right? Basically, that's what it did. Okay. So it's a good thing. Basically, anytime you are coughing, and then Dr. Gita had told a very nice thing during the Gurukul lectures on Sunday. Spoke about the fact that when you're assessing prolapse, you have to use Valsalva. And when you keep coughing, you're supposed to ask the patient to SUI. Sorry, you ask the patient to cough. Why? Because when the patient coughs, the pelvis will contract. Okay, and then you will not be able to see prolapse very well. Remember, Dr. Gita, you had spoken about that point, right?
Yeah.
You're seeing the manifestation of it. When she coughs, her EMG rises. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Now I'm going to show you just one. I'm going to show you a P. 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, 1 second. 1 second. You see the detrusor overactivity here? You see this?
I think PGs, please concentrate on this graph, and what Dr. Aparna is going to beautifully tell you how to subtract, how the abdomen is quiet. Now it's a reverse. Reverse.
The PAB, you see the PAB here? Now you see this. See, now I'm going to, I told you what? I told you that when you start the graph, when you start cystometrogram, you ask the patient to cough first. See, when I ask the patient to cough, both rows, it shows that everything is being measured correctly. You getting my point? Right? And then when we're filling up the bladder, at one point, you look at this detrusor, look at the PVES, you look at the pink one. You see the pink one, right? Here, the PVES rose slightly. Again, it rose slightly here. And again, it rose slightly here. But the PAB didn't rise. So the PDET rose. You see this? PDET, 3 nice, small detrusor overactivity. You see this? Right? This is very different from the cough related, right? Now, look at this patient. This patient has got very severe leaking, right? Now you see PVES is always pink, okay? So PVES, look at this. Look at the amount of contractions. You see this? Amount of contraction. And at the same time, PAB didn't contract. You see this? PAB is flat. So what is PDET? PDET is rising high and coming down. Rising high and coming down. You see the difference between this and that one, madam? Okay? That is
very clear. Very, very clear.
Yeah. So yeah, this is your detrusor overactivity. Whereas that was basically an artifact of the detrusor, okay? Because the PVES recording was more than the PM, right? Okay.
Yeah, and all the PGs should note that you see the green curve. In the previous one, it was like peaks, little peaks.
Yes.
The first one, the initial one, which when I had interjected, Aparna said, no, Dr. Geeta, this is a artifact of the machine. Now just have a look, just like you see your NSTs, you learn to recognize these looks, look, this is an artifact. Whereas the next one, which you just show that, Aparna, the nice bell curve kind, just see the difference in the DO, the overactive bladder. Just see, there are no tick, 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 tick peaks. There's a nice smooth curve. The detrusor is taking its time to contract. Patient is leaking, and then it is coming back when this PVES is going up. But see the purple line, that is the abdominal pressure is not increasing.
Absolutely.
So this increase in the bladder pressure is contributed not by the abdominal muscles. This this contraction is contributed by the detrusor muscle. Therefore, Dr. Aparna has called it as a DO.
Yes. And very importantly, you also look at the surface EMG. Your natural tendency is that when you are leaking, then you will contract up, right? I don't want to leak. That's why surface EMG is increasing. You see that? At the point of leaking, and detrusor overactivity, the EMG is really rising.
So DO means detrusor overactivity.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And if you leak, it is DOI.
Yes.
Okay.
Because in urodynamics, basically, you're seeing a detrusor overactivity. In history taking, you don't call it detrusor overactivity. In history taking, you say overactive bladder weight. Okay, because in that you're not seeing a detrusor overactivity. In urodynamics, you're actually seeing a detrusor overactivity. You getting me? Detrusor muscle is overactive. See, detrusor muscle is overactive. It's going up and down. It's contracting. Okay.
And here, mind you have infused hardly 180 ml, I think. Volume? 185 only. How much volume is that? 64.
Yes.
No. How much is the volume there at which she's having an overactive bladder?
Yeah, it's around,
You have written strong urge, first urge. What are the volumes here at which, what is the filled volume?
The volume infused is only basically 185 ml. Okay.
Can you imagine with such a little urine, such a little volume, her bladder is overactive. So either it is a cystitis or some small capacity bladder.
No. I have patients who got idiopathic who also have this.
Okay.
And very severe detrusor overactivity also. You can also have very severe, they can have neuropathic, but neuropathy will also be very different. I'll just show you. When they have neurogenic, they can have something like this. Look at the neurogenic ones. You see this?
Show that. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
See, it's unstable, like up and down.
Yeah. Lovely. Just see now, the postgraduates must see that the pattern of the peak. See, that was a up and a down slope. Here, this is a neurogenic. It is like it's like an epilepsy going on in the detrusor muscle. It's going up, coming down, So this is the phasic unstable contractions with a stable bladder, or the abdominal. This thing is not rising.
Agreed.
Very nice.
So I kept you different types so that you understand.
Yeah. I think that's how we will understand. PGs, please. Any queries? Kindly ask PGs. Hello, PGs.
Whether they are there or
they are there. Chalo. Anyway, I think Aparna has explained very lucidly. They should Please carry on.
So when I'm doing cystometrogram, I have looked at compliance, I have looked at leaking, by asking them to cough every half an hour, every 50 ml. I have looked at if they've got detrusor contractions. Okay. Now, I'm going to also do one more thing. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do a leak point pressure. Okay. Now, what is leak point pressure? Leak point, and this is something understand very carefully. Okay. When the bladder is filled up to 150 ml, and then again at capacity, I'm going to do one very important thing. I'm going to stop the filling and ask the patient to Valsalva 3 times. Okay. Valsalva 3 times. Okay. When I'm asking the patient to Valsalva 3 times, I'm going to see if she leaks. Okay. Now here in this box, you're seeing 2 Valsalvas. Can you see this? Okay. Now this is basically a cough, but it's okay. But imagine this is Valsalva. Okay. You can also ask them to have 3 coughs, but 3 coughs are not very good as Valsalva. Valsalva is always better. Okay. So I'm doing 3 Valsalvas, and imagine these are Valsalva maneuvers. Okay. The first Valsalva she did, her P-West rose to 85. Next Valsalva she did, her P-West rose to 95. And imagine she did one more Valsalva, 3 Valsalvas now, and her P-West rose to 100. Okay, so 3 Valsalva she's done. You've recorded it. Each Valsalva, you will notice whether she's leaking. Okay, now, what is leak point pressure? Leak point pressure is the lowest P-West amongst the 3 in which there was leaking in the absence of detrusor contraction. Okay. Again, I'm going to say it. I asked the patient to Valsalva 3 times. I noted the highest rise of pressure during each Valsalva. 85, 95, 100, maybe. The 3 Valsalvas are 85, 95, 100. Okay. And imagine if she leaked in one of these attempts. Okay. Note in which attempt she leaked. That is the leak point pressure. Suppose she leaked all the 3 times. 85 hua, she leaked. 95 hua, she leaked. 100 hua, she leaked. Then what is leak point pressure? The lowest one is the leak point pressure. So the 85 rise was the lowest rise. And that's what Valsalva leak point pressure is 85 centimeter of water. Okay. Suppose you did 85, 95, 100. And she only leaked at 100. She never leaked at 85, 95. Then the Valsalva leak point pressure is 100.
Aparna, now just make it clear that these are the pressures in the bladder.
Yeah, P-West. Yeah, exactly. P-West. Highest. Who was P-West? I said that. P-West. Yeah, I told that. It's always P-West. Many people use P-Apt, but it's by convention, by ICS terminology, it's P-West. Okay, I mentioned it, but I'm again mentioning it. The lowest P-West, I said 85, 95, 100, I meant the P-West. The lowest P-West during Valsalva that led to urinary leakage in the absence of a detrusor contraction is called Valsalva leak point pressure.
And this is happening in a stress incontinence.
Yes.
Leaking, just to clarify for the PGs, absolutely. I'm saying
yes.
This is a scenario of a stress urinary. This is not a scenario of a DOI. This is, yes. I think PGs, please, just clarify in your minds. She's meaning it that, okay?
Yes. Okay. Very, 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 very important. Okay. So P-West is lowest P-West at which there is leaking in the absence of detrusor contraction is a measure of stress urinary incontinence. Okay. Now you can also do cough leak point pressure. Ask the patient to cough 3 times, but it's not as good as Valsalva, because in Valsalva you can do graded Valsalva. Okay. Now, very important, why do I do Valsalva leak point pressure? I do Valsalva leak point pressure because it is an indicator for me of severe SUI if VLPP is less than 60 centimeter water. I'm going to come to that later on. If your Valsalva leak point pressure is less than 60 centimeter water, it may be intrinsic sphincter deficiency. Okay. Okay. Very importantly. Okay. If our, one second. एक minute, huh?
Yeah. You see, what Dr.
Hmm.
Aparna is trying to tell you is that the lower the VLPP means you just need a very small trigger to leak. In other words, even at say 60 is probably just you're clearing your throat and she leaks. That means it's probably the sphincter or the guard or the gatekeeper outside your house. He is weak. So that's what she's trying to say. Whereas if you have a VLPP of say 100, etc., that means you probably have a hypermobile urethra or something, and you
Yeah.
really need to hit it very hard to leak. But if you have an intrinsic sphincter, you just even need to clear your throat maybe and you will leak. That is what she's trying to say.
Very right, very right. Dr. Geeta has really simplified it. When your Valsalva leak point pressure is low, it means the sphincter is weak. Urethral sphincter is weak. If urethral sphincter is weak, you do not need to, as you said, like even if you clear a throat or even little Valsalva, you will leak. But if your sphincter is strong, you need a very strong Valsalva to leak, right? Because you have to push through the barrier. Okay, the weak sphincter leads to lower Valsalva leak point pressure. I need to know when the sphincter is weak, and that's called intrinsic sphincter deficiency. And I need to know this. Why? I need to know this because of the fact that I need to know in which woman I need to do tighter sling surgery, in which woman I may need to put the sling in the bladder neck, right? So, and also women who have got weak sphincter have poor prognosis as opposed to women who have got only urethral hypermobility or genuine pure SUI. Genuine term is not used anymore, pure SUI, where it's not, the sphincter is not weak. Okay, it's only hypermobility. In urethral hypermobility, I'm not so worried about when I'm tensioning the sling. But when I've got a woman with low Valsalva leak point pressure, I really need to tension a little more tighter because I need to give support to the urethra. The sphincter is very weak. Okay. So Valsalva leak point pressure is a measure of intrinsic sphincter deficiency. It's only one of the only two ways in which intrinsic sphincter deficiency is diagnosed. It's basically Valsalva leak point pressure, the lowest vesical pressure during Valsalva that provokes urinary leakage in the absence of a detrusor contraction. And with less than 60 centimeter water, it's indicative of ISD. Okay. Now, did you all understand cystometrogram?
Yeah, and so one thing I may add is that in case you have a detrusor overactivity that you will see, because in those cases, obviously, students, you will not put a tape. You understand how important it is for you to differentiate, because if she is coming with leaking, wetting of her panties, and you are a doctor and you say, yes, I'll put a tape. But imagine if that panty wetting was not due to a hypermobile, it was due to something wrong with the bladder. Maybe she has a cystitis or something, and imagine you put a tape, you will make her miserable. So what Dr. Aparna has taught you is you have to look at the cause, and all these investigations help you to tailor your treatment, tailor how tight you will put the tape or loose or whatever, right?
Yeah. Now, one very important thing. Now, you've spoken about that, right? When you put in a sling, right? Now, you put in a sling only in SUI. You do not put in a sling in urgency incontinence or detrusor overactivity incontinence because you can destroy the patient's life. But I want to tell you one very important thing. Why do you need to do urodynamics before surgery of sling? Because many times cough triggers a bladder contraction. Okay, so the woman might give you a history. I'm going to explain this graph to you, this particular one. Okay, now many times women will come and give you a history. I leak on cough. You must not assume that she's got SUI. There might be something else happening. Okay, now look at this patient. Okay, I only look at PVES. You see this PVES here, my arrow. Okay, now only look at PVES. Okay, I told you at every 50 ml, I'm making the patient cough, right? So like I made a cough at the beginning, it came down. Okay, again at 50 ml, I made a cough, it came down. There's no leaking. Okay, again I made a cough, again I made a cough, again I made a cough. It's coming down. When you're coughing, the pressure rising, but again coming down, again coming down, again coming down, again coming down. Now look at this here. I made a cough. Did it come down? No, there was a bladder contraction. You see that? Saw that? And she leaked at this point. Here, the cough triggered bladder contraction. Here, the leaking that happened was because of a bladder contraction triggered by the cough. This patient is not SUI. In SUI, you have no bladder contraction. If she leaked any time here without any bladder contraction, then it would have been SUI. right? So many times. 1, 2, see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 times we made her cough. If any of these 11 times she had leaked, then to serve in SUI. But she didn't leak on these 11 times. She leaked the 12th time where the cough triggered bladder contraction. This is called as cough-induced detrusor overactivity, and that or cough-associated detrusor overactivity. And this is not SUI. This is detrusor overactivity. This is urgency incontinence. Here also you would not put a sling. That is why it's so important to do urodynamics before you put in a sling surgery, because you might end up putting sling in a wrong patient. Okay, just to let you know. Okay, because to complete what madam is saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Aparna, in fact, that can you just show back that this one, the cough-induced overactivity? Just let me explain one more thing. That now, if you see these 11 coughs, you see the detrusor P det, it's remarkably stable.
Yeah,
and there is no leak. Mind you, if there was a leak, even then this detrusor would have been stable. That leak was due to a hypermobile urethra. You understand? Please understand what Dr. Aparna is trying to say. Any leak associated with a detrusor overactivity is a type of what you call DOI or urgency or urge incontinence. Treatment is medical. Any leak which is associated with this true, detrusor, pressure is stable, but you see leak, the urethra leaking urine, that is SUI. So that's what she's trying to explain. So, some PGs may understand, but madam, she is leaking, bladder is contracting. Yes, bladder is contracting. That is why she is leaking. So you have to treat her leaking by preventing the bladder from contracting during these stresses and not put a tape. Right? Okay. Thank you, Aparna. I'm just clarifying things because their level is a little, very primary level. Yeah.
No, I understand. No. I'm very happy. Don't worry at all. I mean, we're all teaching, so it's all important, and you know your students better. So what has to be bridge, you have to come in and bridge. This is interactive. This is not about me speaking and somebody listening. It's about at the end of this lecture, everybody knows urodynamics. At least read a urodynamics chart. Okay, understood? Okay, now I'm going to go to micturition, right? This is very easy, right? Pressure flow study. Go ahead. One question is being coming. Yeah.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. Ma'am, is the ALPP the same as VLPP, the abdominal leak point pressure and the Valsalva leak point pressure?
Generally the same, but it's better to use Valsalva leak point pressures. Okay.
And ma'am, there is one entity called as DLPP, ma'am.
No, DLPP, that you don't need. Detrusor leak point pressures are only used in children or in patients with bladder compliance issues, not to be used anymore. Okay, only use Valsalva leak point pressures. Okay, and it's too much for junior people. Okay, but you don't use DLPP. DLPP is not supposed to be used for DLPP is in those with bladder muscle pressure issues. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Any other question?
Carry on.
Yeah. I'm going to finish micturition study and then I'll go on to UPP, urethral pressure profile, just to complete the whole thing. Okay. Now, what is, I did uroflowmetry in which there were no transducers. Okay. Imagine now I am making her pee with the transducer in place. That is pressure flow study or voiding cystometry. Okay. Or micturition study, right? Basically, everything is in place. The pressures are being measured and I'm making her pee. Okay. So now, normally what happens, you see this, right? In uroflowmetry, I'm only going to see these two things, the lower two things. But because I'm doing uroflowmetry along with all the pressure transducers, it's in instrumented flowmetry, I'm going to see all the pressures also, correct? So you have the volume. This green thing here is the volume. She voided 577 ml. I've got the flow, it's bell-shaped curve, which is great. I've got the EMG. Look at the EMG, how it's narrowed. You see this? EMG is relaxed. Okay. The P-det rose a little bit. Okay, you see that? And the P-apt was relaxed. Okay. And the P-west rose a little bit. So basically, women will pee by silencing of the EMG, pelvic floor relaxation, urethral relaxation, and detrusor contraction. Okay. So flow, you see the flow, you see, so basically now urethral and pelvic relaxation, detrusor contraction, continuous flow leading to bladder empty. This is continuous flow. This is normally how
and this Aparna, they must understand this, that there was a command to void. They should not read this in the exam.
Every time.
Mention in your graph command to void, because anybody giving it in the exam as a spot can say this is an overactive bladder because there was a detrusor.
No. Basically, it's a micturition study for 2-3 reasons, right? You're seeing the volume and flow. Okay, you wouldn't see the volume and flow in your you wouldn't see a graph like this in in detrusor overactivity. Second biggest, yes, every time, like I told you in uroflowmetry, you make the patient sit, right? And you give the command, pressure. Okay, now I give you permission to void, and only then they start voiding. Okay. Yeah. So now this is simple. Okay. I'm not going to go into, because if I go, I don't want to go into dysfunctional voiding more than I did, because it'll be too complicated for students.
No. I think just keep it simple. Keep the diagnosis of a simple normal graphs, what the normal graphs look like.
Yeah. Lastly, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about urethral pressure profile, just a little bit. Okay. Now, in my own clinic, I also do urethral pressure profile. What is urethral pressure profile? Urethral pressure profile basically is the intraluminal pressure along the length of the urethra. Okay. Now, I do urethral pressure profile before I do cystometrogram. The patient is done uroflowmetry, come and sit on the chair, sat on the chair. Then what I will do, I will only see, now you saw this, now I'm going to show you this. Okay. Yeah. I will only put in the bladder transducer. You see this? The bladder transducer, it's inside. Okay. And I'll put it how? I will put both these balloons inside the bladder. Okay. I will put the catheter inside so much that both the balloons are inside the bladder. Both the bladder pressure balloon and the urethral pressure balloon. So right now when I'm putting it both inside the bladder, they are measuring the bladder pressures. Both are measuring bladder pressure. Then we have a puller. The puller starts pulling out the catheter at a very slow rate. Okay, around 1 centimeter per minute. And it's pulling it out slowly. A point will come when the yellow part, the yellow transducer comes into the urethra. You see this now, the urethra in this particular graph, the yellow part is already in the urethra. You're pulling it out. Okay, you're pulling it out. And when you're pulling it out, the yellow will come into the urethra, but the blue will remain in the bladder, right? A point will come when that's happened. When the yellow is in the urethra, because urethra is a narrow tube, the pressure starts rising. Okay? And as it's going through the urethra, the pressure will rise and then come down. I'm going to show you the graph, how it looks. 1 second. Here. Yeah. You see this? When it's moving through the urethra, the urethral transducer, the pressure of the urethral transducer will rise up and come down. But the bladder pressure will remain the same. Okay, the P vessel will remain the same. The PURA will increase. You getting my point? The bladder resting pressure remains the same. The top transducer measures the same thing. It's still in the bladder. But because the urethral transducers come in the urethra, the pressure will rise and come down. What does this give me? This gives me the maximal difference between the urethral pressure and the bladder pressure. You see this? At this particular point in time, when this particular point in time, the urethral pressure has come here. Okay? Now, at this particular point in time, the urethral pressure has gone to maximum. So, the maximum difference between the peak and the resting bladder pressure is the maximal urethral closure pressure. Okay? It is the maximal rise of the urethra pressure above the bladder pressure. That's called MUCP. Maximal urethral closure pressure. Now, ISD, that is intrinsic sphincter deficiency, is diagnosed based on two things. I already told you. Valsalva leak point pressure less than 60 centimeter water and or MUCP less than 20 centimeter water. Understand that. Okay. If your MUCP is less than 20 centimeter water, it means your urethra is very weak. And in that, again, I have to put a sling which is tighter. And this is only for SUI patients. Okay. I get a lot of patients with leaking, right? Who have got, or they've undergone cancer surgery, or they've undergone some fibrosis there, or they've undergone some trauma there, or they are old women with, ISD, right? In them, your MUCP will be very low. Such patients have to put tighter sling when they have got SUI. Okay? Understood? Just to complete the whole thing. Any questions?
No, I think we can just now do the concluding slides.
Yeah. Now, do you want me to? Okay. Now let us look at SUI. Okay. Do you do urodynamics before SUI? Okay. Now, when will you do it? Right. When you have a patient of SUI, you can run your diagnostics. Okay. And you come to a point you understand the patient of SUI. For your preliminary treatment, your pelvic floor muscle strengthening treatment, biofeedback treatment, you do not need to do urodynamics. But before sling surgery, do you do it or not do it is a conundrum, right? Now, according to NICE guidelines or any of the ACOG guidelines, AUGS guidelines, all of them say if a woman has got pure SUI, you can do surgery without urodynamics. You only need uroflowmetry. However, remember one important thing. Pure SUI means the patient has no significant PVR, no prior lower urinary tract surgeries, either pure SUI or stress predominant mixed incontinence, and no high grade prolapse. Now, the problem is this: very few women fall into this classical pure SUI without any problems. That's why most of us practicing urogynecologists, we tend to do urodynamics before SUI surgery, sling surgery, right? Because you will find pure uncomplicated SUI only in 5 to 36% of the population. Very few women have pure SUI, pure uncomplicated SUI. Many women will have voiding dysfunction. Many women will have mixed incontinence. Many women will have, especially prolapse patients. And it's very important for gynacs to understand this, because many times women, gynacs deal with prolapse and SUI. When you have prolapse and SUI, it becomes complicated. Correct? So you must, and what happens also when women have prolapse, long-standing prolapse, patients tend to push to pee. Okay? They tend to push to pee. Why? Because when you have prolapse and urethra is kinked, and urethra is kinked, you have to push to pee. Now, when you push to pee after sling surgery, the sling only knows one thing: somebody is pushing, I have to obstruct. Correct? So then the sling will become obstructive after sling surgery. Why? Because the woman is pushing to pee. Such a woman, I need to see on urodynamics that she is pushing to pee. I'll just show you one urodynamics where the woman is pushing to pee. 1 second, where is it? Yeah. You see this P apt here? You see this P apt here? Look at this patient pushing to pee. You see this? You see this patient pushing to pee. When the patient is pushing to pee, right? And everything else is normal, I have trained her how to not push to pee. And remember, this happens in prolapse patients. So if you go into your private practice and you start doing if you do prolapse surgery, please understand you are going to see a lot of patients who push to pee. Okay, so those patients I need to see. How do I find out they're pushing to pee? When I'm doing the urodynamics, I'll see that the pee amp is rising up and down, up and down, up and down. They're pushing to pee. Okay, and those patients I have to train them how to void without pushing, and only then doing sling surgery. Okay, now another reason why you need urodynamics is this. I already showed you this graph. Cough-induced detrusor overactivity you can only diagnose in urodynamics. You cannot diagnose on history alone. So that's why you need to do urodynamics. Third thing is, I already told you, ISD, intrinsic sphincter deficiency, the severest form of SUI is a urodynamic diagnosis. And it is basically MUCP less than 20 centimeter of water and VLPP less than 60 centimeter of water. This is a urodynamic diagnosis. I cannot diagnose ISD without urodynamics. Right? So, and also, I won't go through this busy graph. I just want to tell you this. A lot of time when you do urodynamics, you come out with other stuff. You can pick up problems that you cannot without doing urodynamics. So a lot of us tend to do urodynamics before doing sling surgery, just to let you know. Okay. Now, just to complete the picture, in urgency incontinence, when a woman comes to you with urgency incontinence, when will you do urodynamics? When a woman comes to you with urgency incontinence, I will do diet chart, fluid chart, medication, physiotherapy. That's biofeedback. This is first line treatment. First line treatment I can do without urodynamics. In my clinic, we do this first line treatment without urodynamics. If she fails first line treatment, then I will do urodynamics, and then only after that will I do Botox or sacral neuromodulation. Okay. So only when in urgency incontinence, the first time treatment fails, you will do urodynamics. But if a woman comes to me with voiding dysfunction, she comes to me along with SUI, or she comes to me with mixed incontinence and high PVR or whatever, I will do urodynamics at the outset itself. Or she comes to me with leaking that she's not aware of what kind of leaking she has, she's not sure, continuous leaking, insensible leaking, all of those things I will do leaking even without urodynamics. Sorry, I will do urodynamics. No. I will do leaking without urodynamics. Sorry, this is a slip of tongue. I will always do urodynamics at the first hand only before any treatment. Yeah. I'm going to show you some graphs. Okay. Now this patient, look at this. In the CMG, right, we did Valsalva, right? A Valsalva was only 30. You see this? 3 Valsalvas we did. But the Valsalva was only 30 and she leaked. Okay? This is patient of ISD. Okay? Look at this. VLPP lowest was 30. She leaked at 30. This is a patient with ISD. Okay? Now next patient. Again, look at this. Leak on cough. 30-year-old female leaks on cough. You see this? This leak has triggered bladder contraction. You see the bladder. See, now you look at the P-DET, look at the P-AB, and look at the P-VES. Okay? When I ask patient to cough, look at this. She coughed and the bladder contracted. You know the bladder contracted because the P-AB didn't contract. She coughed. The cough caused bladder pressure increase, abdominal pressure to increase, but there's no contraction here. Whereas there's a contraction here. This means the bladder contracted after the cough. The abdomen didn't contract. The abdomen only rose up and down for a cough. This is, and here the bladder contracted, and that's why the P-DET is risen like this. This is not SUI. This is cough-induced detrusor overactivity. Clearly, see the difference between this and this, right? Here the bladder muscle contracted. Here the abdominal muscle did not contract, and there is leaking happening because of detrusor overactivity. So this is cough-induced detrusor overactivity.
Yeah, just show that back. Just show that back. So I think all the PGs, please note that the second peak is not there in your P-AB, but it is there in the P-DET. Had she been like this is a cough-induced this thing leak, right? This is a detrusor overactivity induced by a cough. Had she been a genuine stress incontinence, then there wouldn't have been this contraction in the there would have been a leak, but the P-DET would have been flat, right?
Yes.
So they must understand when the leak is associated with the detrusor contraction, it is a detrusor overactivity. But if she's wetting her panties and there is no P-DET, P-DET is a flat line. That means it is probably somewhere else.
Okay, right? Now I've already showed you this. I've already showed you DO. I've shown you multiple graphs, right? Already. The DO I've showed you this, right? I've already showed you this one. I've already showed you this one. DO.
Right.
DO. Okay. Now, look at this DO. Look at this. Look at this. Now tell me what is happening here. See your P-DET. Look at the P-DET. And look at your P-VES. What is happening here?
See, the abdominal pressure is absolutely stable, but the vesical pressure is rising, and that contribution is because of the detrusor contraction.
No, you know what? I've written detrusor overactivity is a confusion thing. This is a non-compliant bladder.
Nee, but then Aparna, if you see this, the detrusor, of course, it's a non-compliant, but what I'm trying to explain to PGs is that just to read it on a graph, that you have to see which the red line or the purple line is going up and down, and the subtraction is telling you what. Of course, your interpretation is whatever, but there is CMG, no activity, no cuff, nothing. So that will, now when you see the EMG, you will now realize that yes, she is leaking also. So it's a non-compliant bladder. So because in the top graph you have shown us.
I think you got non-compliant bladder. Basically, there's a patient in whom the bladder is absolutely, non-fibrotic bladder or fibrous bladder muscle damage, where the bladder muscle is not, you should be able to expand the bladder without pressure rising. Here, the pressure is rising when she's filling. You see this, right? The pressure rising. And by the bladder pressure is rising, the bladder detrusor muscle pressure is rising.
But where is the leak? There is no leak in this.
No? Compliant, non-compliant bladder don't have to leak.
No, but I'm saying that there's a panel which normally shows the voided volume. That's not there.
No. This is CMG, na?
No. But normally you make a notation. Na? If there is a leak, you note somewhere down below. Na?
No. But this is not, I'm okay with not leaking. This is non-compliant bladder. Non-compliant bladder, there is not leak. I'm talking compliance here. You forget the overactivity. You forget the reducer overactivity here. This is not a classical DO. This is a non-compliant bladder. I put that DO there as a confusion thing for the student.
Yeah. And also, if you notice the postgraduates, that the real DOs, the graph was not like this. There was a smooth rise. You see, there was a peak and a trough. Just compare. If they see Aparna is flashing the two greens, you see she's flashing the two greens. See the pattern of the green. So
it's going up. The pressure is rising up.
Yes, slowly rising. Unlike all these other where there was a peak and a trough. So that is a non-compliant.
See, here the bladder actually contracted. Okay.
Yes.
Here the bladder doesn't contract. The bladder is non-compliant. So the bladder pressure is rising while the bladder is filling. Okay.
Right.
Understood, na? Okay.
Yes.
Now I've already showed you neurogenic also. I've already showed you neurogenic, right? This phasic, funny contractions of the bladder. Yeah. Okay. Now, lastly, I already showed you dyssynergia. This is another way of showing dyssynergia. You see, while avoiding, she had dyssynergia. You see this? Like the EMG is going. I've already shown you dyssynergia nicely.
Yeah, she needs to do biofeedback now.
Yeah, she needs to do biofeedback. Okay, now look at this. Now I'm showing you interpret flow, right? Abnormal, right? Basically, this is uroflowmetry. Okay, now is this, how do you know it's uroflowmetry? You only have flow and volume. And what do you see? You see interpret flow. You see the top with interpret flow, correct? Right? You can interpret this graph because she's voided 310 ml, which is good volume void. Okay, and it's interpret flow. Okay, and that is abnormal. Okay, here is it normal or abnormal? What is happening here? I think this is too complex. I would not take them to the, if they can say, it's great. If you can say,
they can attempt it. You see the abdominal pressure is rising. That means she's probably doing Valsalva there or coughing. And the P-West is also rising. And if you see the detrusor pressure, the subtracted pressure is practically quiet. Is she leaking also with this?
No. Basically, this is first of all, it's a micturition study. Okay, it's flow.
So she's Valsalvaing, but not leaking, right?
No. You don't talk about leaking in micturition. No, this is a micturition study.
No, I know that she's filling, but I'm saying while doing Valsalva,
she's not a filling flow. This is not a hysterometrogram. This is a pressure flow study. This is a voiding study.
Oh, this is a voiding study. Okay.
Yeah. First of all, because there's a flow that's happening. You see this flow here? Interpret flow.
Okay. I didn't see that. Yes.
Always notice what is there on the. She look at this. She voided, but she voided interpret flow. You see this? Now I want to know what is happening in her, right? So this is a person with basically
she's using Valsalvine
to push. Basically, this is a patient in whom, and also look at the EMG, right? EMG is rising. Either this patient is a dysfunctional voider because she's valsalving to overcome. When you valsalva, your blood pressure will, pelvic muscle also will go up and down. This is a patient in whom I have to rule out two things. Is there a detrusor underactivity or is she dysfunctional voiding? Okay. You see this?
Can you show the filling cystometry graph of this patient?
No, I don't have that, but that was fine. These patients who have this kind of problem don't have to have a problem during filling cystometry.
No, I'm just asking because that would explain to the students that, look, normally they are okay, but it's the problem is in the voiding.
Normally, this is a patient of dysfunctional voiding. So this patient
that's what I'm saying. The problem is in the voiding. It's not a SUI or an overactive bladder or anything.
Yeah, I don't want to go into dysfunctional voiding for the student. It will become too complicated.
No. But just to differentiate,
Her SUI, I mean, this is a patient of dysfunctional voiding where the filling was great, but basically the voiding showed problems.
Right.
I don't want to go into it. It will be too complex for them.
No. But I think we've done a good job, and I hope the PGs have understood some things, if not everything, at least 10% also if they have grasped. So thank you, Dr. Aparna. Thank you so much. And thank you, Tablets India, for your support always. And PGs, if you would like to take any questions, or we close now?
I'm happy to answer any questions.
That was real great. You all understood a lot.
Thank you.